Welcome, everyone. This is Hamsterdam speaking to you from the Disney Villainous Plotcast. We have a delightfully wicked group of expert players here from the Let's Get Wicked Discord to discuss our topic for today, villain power rankings. But before we dive in, let's meet our group and have them tell us their favorite villain to play. First up, our generous host, MetaCross.
Greetings everyone, it's been a while, but I'm glad to be back talking about villains.
And your favorite villain, if you don't mind. Who do you enjoy playing the most?
My favorite villain is Teal Syndrome. I just love killing all those pesky heroes time and time again, and I love using the Omnidroid as...
Fantastic.
Well, as a hero killing machine.
Nothing better. Next up, we have Loki.
Hello, everyone. My name is Loki. It's very nice to meet you all. I enjoy playing as Ursula in the original starter pack in Disney Villainous. I love playing as Ursula because I love switching from her aquatic side to her human side, back and forth willy-nilly, and I love to just sneak up on these dastardly villains.
Fantastic. Next up, we have Jarek.
Yes, hello everybody, everyone out of there. I am a Hades main still to this day. Just love moving Titans, love doing that progress. Yes, it's frustrating, but I still enjoy it still.
Who doesn't? Next up, we have Lord.
How is it going, y'all? Just as like a little introduction, I'm not lazy. I'm just in energy saving mode all the time. But my favorite Disney villain is one of the most recent releases, Shere Khan.
Bold. We like it. And last, but certainly not least, werothegreat.
Howdy. I made a whole video about this like a couple years ago, and I would have to say that my favorite is still the Horned King. I just love getting out all those Cauldron-born and just smacking down Terran and Eilonwy and poor Henwyn.
They all had it coming. And for me personally, as anyone who has been in the Discord can see by my picture, Maleficent, the mistress of all evil, will always be my lady. I love her from the beginning to the end. So today we are discussing these power rankings, or tier lists as they're also known, of the Disney villains. But before we actually start laying these all out, I'd like to ask sort of a general question of the group. You can all jump in at any time. Why do you think tier lists matter? Or do they? Are they just really for fun? Or is there something more going on here? I'd love to hear what anyone has to think about that.
That's a really good question. I think tier lists, sort of a give and take. I think some people like to do a tier list because they have their own personal rankings on specific characters. Some people agree with it, some people don't agree with it.
I mean, I think like a lot of us have this need to categorize things, put things into boxes, and organize, have things make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think also a big reason is other people are trying to look for maybe some validation of, like, let's say their villain is in the bottom tier of everyone's list. People want to know why, and they want to have, validation for that. But also, I think it's important to have a varying differences of opinion. The way people can also gauge and be like, well, why is this person high up? Why is this person so low? Then they can try to sort of experiment for themselves and progressively redo their list.
Yeah, I mean, like, there is like many tier lists out there that are just for like the competitive scene, which I can agree on some, and there's some that are just personally, and for just fun. I love playing them.
Yeah, when I made my video, it was very much for who do I enjoy most playing as or playing against, and less who is the most competitively viable.
Yes.
Like, there were a couple of villains that are definitely more competitively viable that I ranked very low because I just didn't find them interesting. Like, I still don't find Captain Hook interesting. They made a second version of him, and it's still like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into that quite soon. Meta, how do you feel about this?
Well, trailers are important, especially in the fandom for Villainous, because we make a lot of tournaments, and of course you wanna know which character is the best, has the best chances to win. But also, I think it's important to have an idea of which character is better and why, so that when the designers create new characters, they can base the difficulty and the skill needed to play certain characters, the new characters, so that the game is as balanced as possible.
I think that's an
I think going off from that, just it kind of goes along with as new characters come out, like where are they gonna fit? Like if you go with it like first time round, it's like, okay, where am I gonna fit with this on a scale of 1 to 10? How powerful are they? Or like how much do I like playing this character?
I also say that, like, taking into consideration a lot of competitive play online on Tabletop Simulator is 1v1, but a lot of play that you will do in person is going to be 3 or more people. And I would definitely have, if I were making a power ranking, different lists for 1v1 versus multiplayer, because 1v1 there are quite a few villains who are just too slow, or they're too fate fragile, and they're just typically not going to win games. But in a 3 or more player game, I think basically everyone is viable because of the fate mechanic. And so some of these slower villains can be like, oh, I'm harmless, I'm nowhere near close to my objective, go fate the other people. And so they can slip under the radar and sneak in a win.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Said.
The game changes a lot when you play in 3 players, 4 players, and so on. Particularly, I feel like the difference between characters is not as noticeable when the more people you have in your game, because if someone is obviously ahead, then everyone else can just fade them and ignore the slower characters. This is the reason why games like Cosmic Encounter, even though the characters are vastly different from each other, and there are some that are obviously better than others, still retains some balance, because if someone's winning, everyone else can just attack that person more. So that's why I normally enjoy this game in different ways when playing 1v1 compared to playing multiplayer, I would call it. Because in multiplayer is more relaxed, you don't worry about every card that's left in your opponent's deck and so on. While in 1v1, you gotta make sure that you fade when it's most useful, when you're gonna affect the other person more, and you're gonna try to play safer, so that when you get faded, you don't get as much repercussions.
That's a very well said point. And I think also in the future, there should be a video comparing what it's like to play in a multiplayer version of Villainous versus a single player. But for today, I think we are going to primarily focus on the single player side of things, the 1v1 aspect of the game that is what dominates this competitive scene. So as we kind of go through the rankings here, I would like to throw out some just general questions and ideas for everyone in our group here to keep in mind that we can hopefully touch on a little as we discuss, as a way to both help and inform anyone who is newer to the game and or interested in getting into the game. So just some things to keep in mind if you can work them into your discussions. What qualities in a villain are important in determining their place on a tier list? And how have your perceptions of the villains changed since entering this wonderful community and or the competitive Disney villainous scene in general? So, things to keep in mind as we move forward. Now, I believe the last time these podcasts were set up, which has been far too long, I'm glad we're back for this, the competitive scene looked pretty much set in stone, with a couple of very key villains sitting at the top of the list: Madame Mim, Dr. Facilier, and the Evil Queen. They were pretty much at the top of most people's rankings in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. However, since that time, we've had an influx of new villains, including a brand new revised box of most of the original villains who may have shaken some things up. So, opening the floor up to anyone in general, and does anyone want to start off by listing who they think the top villains are right now in terms of the 1v1 competitive scene?
I mean, I can go ahead here. I mean, you mentioned Madame M right off the bat. I was going to have a whole joke about that, but whatever. I think with Sugar and Spite, King Candy has kind of emerged for me as a decent counter to Mim, but like in a balanced way. Because the whole issue with Mim is she's got those two bottom row fates. So what you need is either a villain who can finish their objective before she does while still enduring fate, or where fate doesn't really do much against them, like Lotso, but then Lotso has his own problems. King Candy, he's not that fast, but he's able to sneak under Mim. He's able to fate quite a lot himself at times. I don't know, he just kind of works well versus her.
Well said. I think we haven't heard much from Lord or Jarek thus far. Would you guys like to jump in?
Yeah. I think in response to King Candy, I definitely think there still is a lot of people that don't necessarily have the expansion or haven't played it yet. So I think in that aspect, it's still newer to some people. But that is a really good point about King Candy. I think in the top realm of, I'd say, 1v1s, we can't forget about introduction to Evil Prince John. Like, me personally, that is such a massive upgrade, and he's actually become a really good counterpart when I play Madame Mim, because I'd say the last time I played I2E Prince John versus Mim out of like 10 matches, I'd say I win about half of them, maybe a little over half, just because it's a lot easier to just have Robin Hood at the jail to start your turn. You have a couple of effects that are worded differently, so it's just easier to get around, and you're able to fate quite a bit more than you normally would be able to.
I mean, Prince John does have that issue where, like Mim, he can fate every turn if you have Sir Hiss at Nottingham. So, I mean, even old version Prince John was still pretty good against her and had kind of the same problems.
Yeah, I mean, even with old Prince John, yes, they can still do it, but it is easier with I2E just because there are certain effect cards that are worded differently, so it makes it more flexible, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I would say, based on what I'm hearing so far, and Jarek, of course, please, and Loki, please feel free to jump in at any time here. It sounds like Introduction to Evil Prince John is making a fairly decent case for moving up the Mount Rushmore of strong villains here. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I agree on that. I would say like maybe on the like this PJ in the I2E section definitely is up there in the competitive scene for a lot of villains like who want to go against, like, I think he can be against like many competitive villains, like maybe Evil Queen and Facilier. I would say he can be good against like many of all the other characters, but some of them are slow. But like I think there's a lot of good counteractive parts to it. And well, you also told me that point about King Kenny being like very against Mim. I'm actually very curious on that matchup, and I can agree on that point.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because a lot of his Fate deck doesn't really do much against him until he's started his race, or like there's the Beacon, but that only matters if he has Cybugs out. And then he only has the 4 heroes but they only cover like a couple actions, and he can just skirt past them. He has actions that let him. He has cards that let him get actions from underneath them, and so fading him doesn't really do as much until he starts the race, and then okay, I gotta push him back. I gotta move the racer token forward, and it's just he's got these two halves of his game.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
there's a lot to say about out of order because let's say you have a decent amount of power, you play out of order, but then you play pay to race, you get faded to move back, then you can just next person that gains 2 power, bring it back and do pay to race again. So I mean, it's a really good combo that I don't think is used enough. And obviously, whenever you start the race, you're trying to probably covet the 6 power card, so the token doesn't go 8 spots. So I'd say like that's becoming more of a thing that I'm seeing, especially more on like the competitive side.
Hmm. I think because you mentioned Facilier and like now King Candy and all that. I think with a lot of these top ranking um newcomers of being the most powerful, I think some of them are, in my opinion, some of them are like a double-edged sword. Like Madame Mim, for example. Like yes, she has those like great things where it's just like, okay, you have these two lower fates, but then there's also the upset of like, okay, there's gonna be moments where it'll be very overwhelming, and next thing you know, somebody's gonna notice that and then just come right towards you. Um, with me personally, I would say in a 1v1 would have to be Facilier, but also the Evil Queen. Mainly because of the Evil Queen, like you can just like by and by, like you could just farm up a bunch of like the ingredients for like the poison apple, and like you can farm up those poison tokens to deal with the dwarves and Snow White, like just silently doing all of that without anybody detecting. And then with Vasilia, it's like a lot of strategy being played where if you have all your ducks in a row, then it's like, okay, this is gonna be great. But then like I said, with the double-edged sword, like it's a matter of somebody picking up on that and then just coming right towards you.
So trying to fly a little under the radar, in fact, can be helpful, as we all sort of, I think, have experienced. If you play someone who is typically seen as a fast character, and of course, when we say fast, what we mean is able to complete their objective more quickly than other villains, they make themselves a bigger target. You work harder to beat them. In some ways, I think the tier list makes them bigger targets. You know who is strong, and so you know what you have to do to stop them. There's something interesting to me about that. But we've sort of looked at Mim as, for a while now, as being this focal point, this character that you have to figure out a way to beat because she is going to eventually win. That is the nature of her gameplay. Facilier being one of those other characters that is quite quick and easy to accomplish. But is there any others that we should be looking at who are also on that level? Or have we sort of reached the pinnacle with these few?
No, there's definitely two others on that list with us. We got Lady Tremaine and we have Radigan. I think Lady
Yes.
Tremaine has maybe dropped a little bit in people's estimation because of Madame Mim, because it turns out she's fate fragile if you fate her more than twice and you get through her two
Right.
vicious practical jokes. But and then Radigan is just a perennial because once he gets it, it's so hard to stop him properly. It's so hard to figure out when you should fate him.
Yeah, I think with Radigan, it's the same as Facilier with the double-edged sword. It's like if you have everything there, then it's like it's easy to fly by. Otherwise, people are going to pick up on that.
That's a good point. Meta, do you have anything you want to add on Radigan or Tremaine?
Yeah, those are definitely. I would say back in their time, they were seen as some of the best characters in the game. Before Madame Mim just took a chokehold of the whole fandom, I would say. And she's now seen as like the best character, and you gotta, as you said, you gotta figure out a way to beat her if you want your character to be good. But yeah, Rekan and Lee Tremaine are still very good characters, very fun to play. I would say they are some of the best designed characters because you really feel like you're playing the movie, and also because they are, well, very good in the competitive scene. And speaking of that, here we are joined by LordInfinity, who's got some data they can share with us about which character is better and which character gets the most wins in general. So, LordInfinity, can you hear us?
Oh, I can. I wasn't sure when to talk.
It's all good.
So, let's see.
Welcome aboard. We would like to make sure that we know that the most important thing here by far is that you let us know who your favorite villain to play as is.
Oh, my favorite villain to play as. I would say Mim.
Well, there you go.
Oh, that's a little biased because I played her so much in that one tournament.
Good.
Of course.
So you have some data you'd like to share?
Yes, I have lots of data. Which specific aspect of the data do you want to know?
Which character gets the most wins, I would say.
The most wins. Okay. Let me get to the right page so I don't.
Okay. While you are looking that up, we have not touched on yet some of the other characters in the Introduction to Evil box. We have the newly revised and improved Captain Hook. I would say revised and improved. Others may disagree. We also have the new Ursula and, of course, Maleficent, who needs no improvement. She is perfection in her original form in all things, and yet I will hear dissenting opinions.
I would actually say that the new Maleficent is a bit of a downgrade, in my opinion.
Ooh.
Oh.
So I say that because in the original Worst Takes It All, you don't need to play a curse where there's an ally.
Mhm.
Whereas in the new one, you do. So let's say you have 3 out of the 4 locations done, and you end up getting King Stefan, and then you have to end up vanquishing. You're pretty much, and you don't have a lot of allies out, then you have to sort of like mull through your deck. Anytime I have played the new Maleficent, I have not been able to win as her. I just think it's a little bit of a downgrade because it slows her down a little bit, and you're using a lot more power to play those. Where sometimes, in the WTIA original, you don't necessarily have to focus with your allies.
Mhm.
So I would argue that the only real upgrade in Introduction to Evil was Ursula, and that was mostly just streamlining her gameplay, making her a bit easier to deal with, and making her not degenerate in that you just shove all your heroes into Eric's ship. Like she actually plays better. The other 3 I'd say are more side grades. Like I don't think their power level changed that much. So like Prince John, like yeah, some of his effects changed, some of his conditions changed. But for the most part, you're still doing the same thing. You're still accruing 20 power, and now you have this additional thing of okay, I also need to get Robin Hood, and it kind of takes the same amount of time. Captain Hook, you no longer automatically get Peter Pan played, but you start with Hangman's Tree unlocked, so you can just immediately start fading, which is kind of ridiculous. And then with Maleficent, yeah, you do need to have allies out to get the curses out, but now you can win immediately. You do not need to wait for your next turn, because that's been the single biggest thing for Maleficent in terms of her game, is that there's so many fates that will just ruin her day, and the fact that she had to hold onto her win condition for a full round, that was kind of what was holding her back. So sort of it's a nerf and a buff at the same time. So that's why I think those 3 are side grades.
A valid point.
Now, an interesting thing I can add to this Maleficent and new introduction to evil versus, I keep forgetting, but it's WTIA. is just keeping track between the two what data I do see. Now, Maleficent knew, unfortunately, because of the fear of playing her, I have much less data for her than I have the normal Maleficent. But what data I do have suggests that there's some matchups where, for example, let's look at a good example is against the Introduction to Evil Captain Hook. The normal Maleficent, the original, has about a 50% win rate against Captain Hook, but Maleficent New has a 62.5% win rate. And it's another good example. Now, funny enough, I've seen Maleficent from Introduction to Evil actually be one of the better competitors against Madam Mim. In fact, against Madam Mim, there's only it's a 50% chance, if you will, is what I got data-wise.
And I think that tracks for me because, again, the Captain Hook and Madam Mim are both heavy faders. And so someone who has to hold on to a win condition for a turn is going to be very fragile against those villains. But if you have only 2 curses out, and then you go to the forest and you just drop 2 more, as long as you have those allies out. So it does take a little more planning, but against Mim you have the time, because Mim takes a little while to get going. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think kind of going back to some people being like, just the side, what do you call it, like the side frames or something like that. I think with some of the I2E characters, some of them are good, like the Maleficent and the Ursula, for example. Like those are good, where it's a high chance of winning at one point. But I think some of the I2E upgraded characters do have limits. Like, for example, with Maleficent, you do have to have characters out or allies out in order to start doing curses. Whereas with the WTIA, it's just you can just start cursing left and right. I think with Ursula in the I2E, it's kind of wishy-washy for me, because at first you're just like, okay, I could just have people out and then I could just send them wherever I need to. Whereas with the I2E, it's like they have to be somewhere specific, and then they all have to cram to one area in order to get them all out.
Jarek, would you like to jump in on any of the I2E villains?
So on topic, I don't really own the box that much. I don't really care for the characters that the new remakes that much. So I'm like, I think Ursula is fine in the I2 box, but the R3, I just don't care for them. So nothing
That's
crazy.
Yeah. Nope, that's
Well, I will
perfect.
say, comparing Ursula specifically, that I call her degenerate from the original version because you kind of get to a point where, okay, just shove everyone over there, where you're not really dealing with heroes. You're just kind of shoving them to the side and then trying to do your stuff, and then you're hoping Ariel doesn't come out. Whereas with the I2E version of Ursula, you're very much encouraged, okay, get rid of your heroes, keep your board clear. There's do stuff, as opposed to just, okay, discard my deck until I get my items.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because
Exactly.
you mentioned how everyone sort of like stacks their heroes at Eric's ship. I mean, pretty much everyone does. Obviously, Sebastian, where villain items can't move. So if you don't have the Trident or the Crown, it's over at the far location, and you need to get it over to the first location. Sebastian, in the middle 2 areas can really be a pain in the butt. But it is sort of funny that how easy it is for Ursula just to literally stack all the heroes at one location, and you pretty much have 3 top realms available.
If I could
Yeah, I
add
remember there was a while ago a channel that uploaded strategies for different villains, and for Ursula, they said, shove every single hero to the castle, or what was the rightmost location?
The ship.
The shore.
Yeah, the shore
Yeah,
or
shove every hero to the shore and then lock it. And I remember commenting under that video that takes way too long and it's not necessary. You can just shove them all to Eric's ship.
Oh, far right is the palace, by the way.
Yeah.
when it's not locked.
The palace.
I think what's most interesting about this, and we sort of all, I think everyone here has been in the Discord and in the community for quite some time, even going back as far as the beginning of it. And a lot of our strategies and a lot of our understandings of how the villains are supposed to work meaning in the most optimal way to play them in order to win the game, comes from a lot of this kind of discussion. I know for a lot of newer players, they do things that we would consider to be less than optimal, that are confusing and different. And yet I wonder, in some ways, are there villains that we overlook because we think there's only an optimal way to play them? And so with that in mind, I'd like to ask, anyone that you would pick from among what are typically seen as the bottom tier villains who you think actually deserve a little more praise and have maybe moved up in your perception?
So I have a strong opinion about this one real quick. So in my opinion, from what I have seen, Shere Khan is pretty much a bottom tier. And not necessarily for everyone, but a lot of people that I have talked to or played against, they're like, oh, he's like a C, a D, and F tier. Because it's a lot like those fire tokens, they really get capped. They cap the power, they cap the discard action, they cap the vanquish, or the activate actions, whatever it may be, right? There's a multitude of ways to actually, pretty much lock Shere Khan and not be able to play. It's because they don't understand him fundamentally. So I think people that consider villains bottom tier, they haven't necessarily explored all the options or seen other people play it to like gain an idea. And that's why they understand it as a bottom tiers, because they fundamentally don't know how to like do different strategies or how to incorporate different aspects. And I just think that's my opinion as why people think characters are bottom tiers, because out of the thousands of times that we've played a character, there's 1,000 different ways you can go to a gameplay, but there are a lot of people, especially your casual players, that just focus on it very straightforwardly and don't necessarily think about it the way we do.
And I think that also applies to the top tier villains as well. Because I think Dr. Facilier specifically, I remember when I first started being more involved with the competitive community here, and I kept hearing, oh, Dr. Facilier, he's so broken, he's so OP. I'm just like, what are you talking about?
exactly.
And I think people who think Dr. Facilier is overpowered tend to be people who, oh, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'll let the doctor do his own thing, and then it's 3 turns later, he's won. What? Because you have to fate him, and you have to understand how to fate him. Because the thing about the doctor is, if you don't fate him, he is the easiest objective in the world. You play 3 cards. What makes Dr. Facilier interesting is the fortune pile, which really only comes into effect if you fate him, because there's only like 3 cards that put themselves into the fortune pile. Now, when you do start fading him and you do start giving him a thick stack of a fortune pile, now it's actually a competitive game. And his gameplay actually gets more interesting because he has to interact with the fortune pile. And once you start engaging with that higher level of, okay, I need to fate, I need to know when to fate, I need to know what fate I need to do against this villain, then it starts evening the playing field a little bit more. And that's why I scoff at the idea of Doc being the toppest of the top tier. Like, he is definitely top tier, he's strong, but like, bring him down a little bit.
Yeah. And I would argue the same thing as like your favorite villain, Horned King. Like I feel like a lot of people put him in the bottom tier just because they're like, oh, you have to gain this much power, you have to play in the cauldron. He's actually a relatively easy villain to win as. Sure, Flute or Flam puts all the allies in one location, but it's easy enough just to place another Ancient Shoulders and get another Cauldron Born. Sure, you have to discard your hand, but I mean it's just easy enough to literally go to a discard spot, discard your whole hand, fate, and just keep going. Like, it's relatively easy in his aspect. So I think he needs a little bit more love.
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, for the lowest one, and y'all can debate on this if you want to, but it's a tie between Oogie Boogie and Cruella de Vil. Because with Cruella, it's
Ooh.
a lot on the lines
I see.
of like you have these two allies. Their objective is to help you gain this much of the puppies in one location. Like, how many do we need in from one location with Horace, or how much do we need in one location with Jasper? And a lot of people underestimate that because it's like, oh, it has to be that specific, but it's like, no, it actually adds up to how much you as Cruella also have to add into it.
Mhm.
That's my take with Cruella. With Oogie Boogie, there's so many concepts. There's so many other like steps you have to do. Like for example, there are a ton of like the fake Sandy Clauses that are out that can help you win this. But you also have Oogie's Boogie's dice that goes in with your gameplay, because then that also determines like, you know, what action do you have to take, what cards do you have to put out, what allies do you have to use, or anything like that.
Very good point. Meta, if I remember correctly, you piloted Oogie in the second Battle Royale, I think, and did quite well with him. Do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I don't feel like Oogie Boogie is the worst character, but I do feel that he can struggle a lot because I feel like his locations are not that great. For example, the first location, of course, is awesome. Is the standard gain 3 power, play 2 cards, discard. Awesome location. The others are just not as good, and most probably you're gonna get a hero placed at the first location because it's just the best one in the whole board. So I feel like Oogie Boogie struggles a lot at the beginning because he just doesn't do as many actions as he needs in half of his turns, because of course you're gonna want to spend one turn to gain the 3 power and maybe play 2 cards, and the other turn you're stuck with the gain 2 power and fade, or the gain 0 power and maybe discard some cards. So I feel like Oogie Boogie can struggle a lot, but once you get your allies, once you get a good amount of money, then you can just ignore pretty much every action and just go to any location that has a discard action and play cards, and you'll be fine. Because, for example, when you get your 3 kits out, or maybe a couple of them, there's not much that the heroes do to you because it's very easy to vanquish them. So Oogie Boogie can... I would need to play him more, to be honest. But I don't feel like he's bottom tier.
Fair enough.
And I don't
He does struggle a lot in the beginning.
Sorry to cut you off there. Jarek, it looked like you were going to jump in. Do you have anything you want to say about him or any of the other quote unquote bottom tier villains?
For me, I'm like, I am an Oogie player, but I think even though he can get, I know if he can get faded very well, but his early Sally is very, very harsh, and
Exactly.
like he can do very, very well, even though if he gets faded, he can still make good progress though with his objectives still. Also, fun fact: do you not hold you would and for the Queen of Hearts and the graveyard, graveyard is reversed for Oogie as well.
Mm.
Yeah, it's reversed. Yep. Basically, because Told You Would for the Queen of Hearts is a discard vanquish at the bottom, but Oogie's top is discard vanquish.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to push back a bit against Cruella. I know she sits
Hey,
at
go
the
ahead.
bottom
You and me
Go
both.
ahead.
for a lot of people. And I struggled at first as well when Perfectly Wretched first came out. I was like, how do you win with her? But I have played with her a lot. And the main thing is, yes, she is slow. It takes her a long time to finish her objective. And that's kind of the main detracting point from her, is like it takes so long because you have to get the puppies on the board. Then you have to take them off the board. But everything else, she has a very nice villain deck. Yeah, she does have those 2 allies, but she has a lot of ways to move heroes around, to look underneath them, she's got the poker sticks. to get rid of the heroes. And if you let puppies accumulate on the board, you can get a lot of power from I Live for Furs. And so once you figure out her engine, she can match most villains. I think the one she would struggle the most against would be Madame Mim, because if, again, like a lot of these slower villains, if it's just constant fate after fate after fate, yeah, she'll get a little overwhelmed. But against everyone else, I think she does have a fighting chance.
Exactly.
And the same aspect of that, now, I personally think Gaston is quite higher than most people say, except the one issue is his fate deck. I'm saying, like, almost every single time you play a fate, it can really be detrimental. Because there are times where you can reshuffle the fate deck with the card, and then it just pops back out where you place an obstacle. You play the 5-cost card where you remove 3 obstacles. You're like, yes, I got one more. Oh, crap. Bell comes back. Replace a single obstacle in every location. Like, I feel Gaston is generally hated because of the fate deck. But if you really think about it, he's actually has a quite strong villain deck.
Mm-hmm.
I would say equally I enjoy playing Gaston and Cruella. I both think that they are sometimes difficult to play competitively due to the nature of how competitive players are more attuned to what they need to do in order to stop their opponents. But in a more casual game, they can be quite efficient. They can sneak up on you, and they have fantastic. Cruella especially has fantastic ways of putting together wonderful combos that people who are not familiar with her maybe don't expect. Is she fast enough to beat some of the top tiers? Well, we've seen some very interesting matchups in the past. But someone who is frequently overlooked for putting combos together, at least in my experience outside of the competitive scene, is Mother Gothel.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh
What do
my
we think of
gosh.
Mother Gothel?
I think there's been not necessarily a renaissance, but people are appreciating Mama G a bit more. I think there was the kind of unfortunate
Mama G.
confluence of the competitive online scene was just starting right when Perfectly Wretched first dropped. So people had been playing with Worst Takes It All and Wicked to the Core and Evil Comes Prepared. And so they were more familiar with their villains. They knew their ins and outs better. And then this new set drops, and it's 3 very intricate, complicated, slow villains who are not immediately obvious how you're supposed to go about their win cons, and they're immediately thrust into this competitive environment, so no one really knows what they're doing with them, and it's just immediately, they're all garbage, put them in the trash. But now that they've been around for longer, people have played with them, people have tested them out. I think Mama G is not necessarily in the top tier, but definitely at the top of the middle tier. If you know how to pilot her, she is very competitive.
I actually used to have Mother Gothel in my bottom 5. Now I probably should say she's, probably around middle, 15 to 20. She's moved up a few spots, but not necessarily like bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mother Gothel and Cruella have a sort of different design than some other villains because they can progress their objective without playing cards. What I mean by this is that Cruella has her 2 allies, and they're pretty much necessary to be on the board for you to progress. And you do this by moving them and also activating them. And with Mother Gothel it's similar because you got the brush, you gotta make sure to have Rapunzel in the correct locations for some strategies. And yeah, in general, I love both of their designs. They struggle a bit sometimes with too much fading, especially Cruella, of course. But still, I love them. I've loved to play them, and I believe that if you play them well, they can be better than you would expect.
That's absolutely correct. I think another character that frequently finds themselves at the very bottom of the food chain would be none other than Scar.
I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to say that.
Consistently, it seems that playing as Scar is a one-way ticket to the loser's bracket. For exactly that specific reason, as we in the competitive scene know it, the Hakuna Matata cycle, in which when you defeat a hero, it is placed into your succession pile, only for that hero to be pulled right out again by Hakuna Matata. Is there anyone who wants to challenge the assertion that Scar finds himself at the shallow end of the gene pool?
Oh.
I can go first here.
Nah,
Go ahead.
I go first here. So Scar, yeah, he can be in the okay sometimes, but the problem is that fate deck, that Hakuna Matata loop with Rafiki is such a pain. And the stick is annoying. You put on Mufasa, you put on Simba, like, oh my goodness. There is a lot of his fate deck. Scar's fate deck can be really rough sometimes, but he can be tough competitively sometimes. But is he slow? Yes. Can he be fate locked? Yes. So yeah, that's all my opinions on Scar. I have him really high for me, but he could be good. He could go against many maybe slower characters sometimes, and that's my opinion on Scar right now.
So I think why a lot of people dismiss Scar is there's this you look at Scar, you look at his objective, you see, okay, that's how he's supposed to play, and you sort of get this idea of I shouldn't defeat anyone until I've killed Mufasa, and that is what is going to trap you. You have to be playing your hyenas, you have to be killing heroes even before you've killed Mufasa, because that's where you get the death spiral, you get the infinite Rafikis, is because you have let these heroes sit on your board. You can't let that happen. If you're the one controlling whether or not there are heroes on the board, that means you have an open board. That means you have an open savannah. You can fate when you need to. And it means that now you are setting the pace of the game. And yet, he like Cruella, like Hades, who we haven't talked about yet, like Pete, like Mother Gothel, he is a little slower. It takes him a little bit more time. But you have to play him aggressively, both in killing your heroes and also in fating your opponent.
Something that doesn't get talked about enough is Whisper. You literally play Whisper, play Hakuna Matata, move Zazu over to your hero that you're trying to vanquish. They automatically lose 2 strength, so therefore it's a lot easier to vanquish.
But you got to be real careful about Zazu. Because
exactly. That's what I was about to say. You have to be extremely careful with him, though.
Yeah. I think because I played as Scar in one of the most recent battle royales, and it is hard because honestly, like, not only do you have to be wary of like where your heroes are gonna go, but like also accumulate how many freaking hyenas you could have as your allies, along with Shenzi Banzai and your boy Ed. I mean, like, there's so much that you have to take care of, and it's like, okay, how much do I need to get to vanquish Rafiki? How much do I need to do in order to take care of this specific effect or something like that? Like, that's a lot they have to take in, and that literally throws you for a loop.
Well, maybe people are getting too used to these simple villains. Some of these villains are a little more complicated. You have to think about a little more. And so let's bring in Lotso.
Yes.
So Lotso, I think you kind of do have to play Lotso on rails. You do kind of have to, okay, the heroes stay in the caterpillar room. We're going to keep Rex over here. We're going to do exactly this. We're going to do a checklist. And then we play the sad clown card, whose name I forget.
New Toys Don't Stand a Chance.
Yeah, that one. Because again, this competitive meta is kind of dominated by villains that are hard to fate lock. And if Lotso is up against that, if Syndrome is up against that, if Shere Khan is up against that, then they kind of struggle. And so then you have to play them on rails, or I need to do this exact series of steps, because otherwise the unfate lockable villains are just going to squish me.
Well said. Meta, any thoughts on Lotso there?
Man, Lotso, I really like Lotso. It's fun to play. But sometimes I just feel like everything has to align for you to win. That you gotta make sure you set up everything so that the next turn you get to win. because sometimes it's too obvious that a lot of players gonna win, and fading is not super good against Lotso, but a lot of the time you're gonna be able to set them back at least one turn. So I feel like Lotso and maybe a little bit Sherkan are in the same category for me, in that you gotta make sure you prepare everything for you to win. Because with other villains, you feel like you're doing it step by step and you're slowly getting closer to winning. But with that, you gotta make sure that the last turn of your game is gonna be like the biggest turn you got. Because as I said, failing can set him back a couple turns.
It's true. Actually, it's a very interesting point you raise here in terms of when you're being fated and how fate fragile you may be. And this is something I want to take a quick aside before we talk about the next villain for the general group here. When it comes to fating, how often do you find yourself trying to fate more? Is it entirely match dependent? Do you prefer to fate early to get ahead? How do you all sort of respond to it? Because I know there are a lot of people who believe that if you spend all your time fating, you're not really progressing your goal. And yet there's also the counter argument that if you are fading the other person, they cannot progress their goal.
I think as a competitive scene, everyone can raise their hand. Who tries to first turn fate?
Me. I mean, who has it? That's the question.
Depends on my
very much
opinion.
No, with me, it depends on the character I'm playing as.
I love how we said the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So like, I'm thinking Maleficent. Maleficent does not want to fate first turn. Maleficent wants to go to the forest, gain her 3 power, and play 2 curses first turn.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are certain people.
Yeah, of course. And for example, with Oogie Boogie, as I said, if you play with the new rules where you start the game in the portrait, then I immediately go to the gain 3 power. Because Oogie Boogie really needs a strong first action.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
with other characters, sometimes when you fade first turn, you also get some progress in. So it's not such a hard decision.
I would say in terms of fading, yes, it's important to fade, but if you're to the point where you're pretty much screwed, let's say Lady Cluck is out, you have King Richard, you have Prince John and Robin Hood, and it's just like really hard to get around that, and you already have Sir Hiss out, sure, you can keep going and fading and playing a card here and there or discarding, but that's just pretty much going to be your objective if you're playing in a multi villain game. Whereas if it's 1 versus 1, I think you're actually going to try to fate, but also you're trying to figure out, all right, I can still go over gain 3 power and then I can play a card and discard, so you still have a way to work around it. And then, like, if you're playing somebody like, let's say Shere Khan, where you put a couple of fire tokens out, Tiger versus Tiger, then it's a lot easier to actually go back to your objective and not have to fate for a couple of turns.
Mm-hmm.
There's some of those who probably have to fade early sometimes, but in the more competitive scene, like, you gotta start your objective first sometimes,
Well, what happens, for instance, when you have a variety of objectives? What happens when you find yourself trying to complete 4 different goals from a random pool? And for those who don't know, yes, indeed, the next villain we're going to be talking about here is Pete.
Yeah, it's the multiple objectives that literally, like, already, again, throws you for a loop, but also it already lets you think, oh man, this is never going to happen. So I need to fate as many times as I can in order to actually progress.
And to that end, you definitely need to get all of your allies out so that you can vanquish and clear and make sure you have all of your actions.
Uh-huh.
I have Pete a bit higher because I like the plan in so much, but I can't stand that win big goal anytime. I just can't stand that one. Oh man.
Who hasn't
But I
gone
like
to
playing
the win big location and missed it by that much? It
this for like
is
3
quite difficult.
times
Oh man!
before.
Once you get to that one objective that you're cleared, and now you're gonna have to get through the other ones, you're just like, nope, you're pretty much screwed because this person's closer now.
I actually had a
I,
close game against Lord. You were guest on once, actually, and I won in a close game, literally.
I remember that. Yeah, it was like my
Yeah.
turn or two.
You were going back and forth between me and Faden, and I was like just trying to get my progress, and you just kept hitting me with Mickey and Goofy and
I'm not
Donald,
even
and I was like,
kidding. They airstriked Mickey, or they airstriked Mickey. I drew an outlawed and reshuffled and drew Mickey again. He's like,
"Yup, yup."
but that's one thing I want to mention as a sidebar. One thing that makes Villainous so great is no matter how many times you have played the same character, something new will always pop up. It may not be every single game, but like that, I've never had it happen where somebody airstrikes Mickey and Mickey's come out. In the 6 years I've been playing Pete, I've never had that happen. Right. So it's just like new situations start to occur and new players start to come in. And especially with the not sponsored treacherous tides coming out, it's gonna be it's gonna be a lot easier for people to get the game, start playing, and start like thinking of different ways. So like with Davy Jones, you have to have control token or treasure tokens. But one thing that's cool is like obviously this is all out there already. But as soon as you are able to flip over a treasure token, you have to do what the ability says. We haven't necessarily had that before, which is cool.
That is actually really cool, and that's what I think I'm looking forward to for this new expansion that will be coming out soon. Not sure when, with Davy Jones, but also with Tamatoa, because it's like you have to get the heart of Tafiti, you have to have Maui's hook, and it'll have to be in his lair, and like there's going to be so many steps that you have to take.
I certainly would never, as I've said, play with any sort of pirated copy of anything. I'm a good and virtuous person, but were I to have seen Tamatoa, I can certainly say that they might be faster than we might think. But since they're not out yet, officially, we're not going to give that too much credit at this time. Speaking of people who are undeniably, unbelievably fast, ridiculously fast, how does anyone feel about Hades?
Oh man, yeah.
Hey, if you don't mind me saying, since there is a Hades main in the chat,
Yes.
I think they should speak their opinion.
Is it an audience or a mosaic?
Jarek, how's your feeling on Hades?
Okay, my opinion. Hades is not good competitively. His fate deck sets him back really hard, as always, because Mount Olympus will be blocked, as always. But I was in the Battle Royale 3 as Hades, and I had some pretty intense matchups, like very close. Like they all usually like come down to like maybe like so many fates. And those side abilities are just so fun. I love moving them, using my chariot combos, going towards, even though if I'm getting frustrated, I'm still having a good time with Hades still. But in Battle Royale 3, I got I was in losers bracket round 3, and I got to like I did very well with Hades and a good run.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to be proud of. Meta, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. What I really like about Hades is that he's got the classic design for a villainous character, and what I mean is that some of the first characters in villainous had like these permanent upgrades, and what I mean by that were items that you play and you keep them for the rest of the game. Hades is sort of similar to that, with his what was the card, the chariot, with the chariot, except that the chariot is easily discarded by the fate cards.
Gospel truth, yeah.
I feel like everything about Hades is like designed in the classic way, with the you win at the beginning of your turn, and the objective is very straightforward. And you got, well, of course, your chariot, which is very similar to the crow, for example, which is similar to the crow, the raven. I mean, the raven, the sheriff of Nottingham. You know, those sort of cards that you keep in your realm, and they help you make more progress each turn. So I really hate that the chariot is so easily discarded by the fate cards, because it really feels like Hades needs it to, well, to not be so slow.
I would say he can go get some slow villains though. I think he can go get Corella. He's gonna get Pete. I've actually have had a King Candy Hades matchup before, and I've won with Hades before. He can go against Scar. He can go against. Maybe that's about it, because that's only those I know who are probably going to be good against Hades. So
you'd put him on the upper end of the lower end.
yes, like middle for me competitively. Middle.
I can interject a little here.
Please.
At least historically, the only matchup Hades has been getting above 50% is against Mother Gothel. And I actually, nope, that's it. There is 3 villains he has never faced competitively, though.
And those would be?
Those would be the Introduction to Evil Maleficent, the Shere Khan, and the Introduction to Evil Ursula.
He's not going to stand a chance against those.
I think
that'd be
Jarek and I have
interesting.
done Shere Khan and Hades before.
We made a match before that once.
Honestly, if I had to put someone at the bottom, it would have to be Gaston. Like, because, yeah, he can win if he's up against a slower villain or a villain that has been fate locked, but against any competent player who knows when and how often to fate, you're just never going to get there. You are always going to get hit by an effect that puts back obstacles. You're always going to get hit by some big hero that's going to squat there. Bell is going to keep reappearing. And you can't move things. You have 2 copies of an effect that, by using the move an item or ally action, can only move to adjacent locations. It's just so hard for him to recover from anything, and it's fully possible for him to be just set back to square zero.
That brings up an interesting point that I've had for a while that I've never actually discussed, but do you think all villains in Disney Villainous are equally balanced, or at least have built-in advantages or disadvantages based on their objective and card decks? Let's say Gaston has a pretty decent actual villain deck, but a shit villain deck, versus Syndrome, where his fate deck can be awful, but he has a good villain deck. There's vice versa. But I
don't think Gaston even has a good villain deck. Like, his intimidating card is trying to hunt out allies, but like, why do I want to hunt out allies? I'm trying to get rid of obstacles, and so that card just skips over your effects that get rid of obstacles. Like, there isn't really synergy in his deck. He has one card that uses an activate action, and his activate action can be covered up by a hero. His only engine is LeFou, but that mostly just clutters up his hand, so he's not drawing into the cards he needs.
Monsieur Dark is over, too pricey. Talk about over pricey, 5 dozen eggs. I don't think I've ever seen that used.
One of the most stupid cards in the game, I would say, my opinion.
Like, why?
Although I will say, one of my favorite cards upcoming is Hey Hey. Just nothing, just a troll card. Just saying. It's just a troll card.
Yeah.
I
would actually have to say, going back to Hades and that question, Lord, with who is fixated to be like the baddest and like the best ones, or like the baddest as in like the worst. I think it kind of depends on how you play these characters, and I think I want to touch up to Jafar in that. Because if I compare Jafar with Hades, it's like, yes, there are so many easy ways for you to quickly win this, but then there are so many easy ways for you to screw up.
That's a fair question. I think, and so on that point, then, I think this is somewhat general knowledge among the community. But for anyone who is tuning in and listening, my understanding, and I think the general understanding, is that Jafar is the hero around whom, at least the original box, was sort of balanced. He was the one that they looked at and said, this is the design we want. If you're going to be faster than this, you have to have bigger weaknesses. If you're going to be slower than this, you need to have bigger strengths. Do we feel like that still holds true? Because there was, in my memory, a time where Jafar was considered the ultimate villain, the one that you had to plan around and play against, and people were terrified of going up against him. And yet, perhaps that perception has changed.
I definitely think it's changed because, in my opinion, Jafar's kind of on the lower tier now because he's been out for 7 years. People have been able to exploit him so many times, and it's pretty easy to actually get him or his objective to stop. Like, it's pretty easy to stop him, especially if you're continually being faded. You recycle Aladdin and Abu. You also have Carpet that comes out, but then you also have Jasmine. If you have Jasmine and Raja, it can be a little bit annoying. So I mean, it's definitely gone downhill in the 7 years since he's been out.
Yeah,
I need to push back against that.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Jafar has so many tools to deal with heroes. If he hypnotizes Aladdin, he's gone. Like, that's what you can't play Aladdin early. You can't play Abu early. You have to, okay, when do I play this? When do I play that? It's so hard to fate him. You want Wish to come out when Aladdin is on the board, but it has to come out because you fate with Aladdin. Okay, I need to get a Wish on Aladdin before Aladdin gets hypnotized. Or you want the Wish to go on Genie, or you want the Wish to go on Carpet, but oh no, Carpet's already been hypnotized. Oh, but I can knock him out with the Iago card. Oh, well, he's got a sword on him, you can't kill him now. It's like, it's so frustrating playing against Jafar because he is so inevitable. There is no way to undo progress he has already made. You can only delay him taking his next step. He's kind of the anti-Gaston, because Gaston, you can knock him back into the Stone Age. Jafar, you can only push him back to the last threshold he has reached.
I guess that makes sense. I think on my perspective, I'm thinking more of like multiplayer game versus 1v1, which is mostly what we're talking about. Because in a multiplayer game, it's easy to gang up on Jafar, be like, oh, he's already got the
Depending.
you already got Genie out, you already have the whatever, I forget the freaking card name he needs at the bottom, but it's just like, it's easy to gang up on him. Same thing with a couple other villains. Oh, Mother Gothel's at 8 trust, we need to get her, when you get King and Queen, Flynn Rider out. It's easy to gang up on players with like multiplayer, but we've mostly been talking about 1v1. So I think in your aspect, you're actually correct. Jafar is actually a more feared character, like competitively or 1v1, because he's pretty fast in that aspect.
And we can't not talk about deception. If you are a villain that has to play 2 items, then you're in constant fear of, does he have deception? And that's kind of like what I like about the Horned King, is because with the Horned King, you can have just 1 item out at a time. And he's probably going to hold on to that deception because he's waiting for you to play that second Ancient Soldier. And I'll... but you can proc your conditions because Jafar has to play items. Okay, I'll get out a free one.
Mm-hmm. That's why I like playing Shere Khan against Jafar, because Shere Khan only has 2 items, the eyes and the coils, and most of the time if I'm playing against Jafar, I only have 1 of them. I don't even have to play the other one.
I like the way that we're sort of comparing and contrasting how certain villains match up with each other. I think sometimes it's easy to look at them in a vacuum and say, well, this Madamin is always S tier. There's no beating her with anyone. And yet, here we are. We're examining the way that certain characters from certain levels, if you want to put it that way, can match up better against others just based on how you play. So that is something I would like to actually kind of address to the group here. How often do you find yourself in a competitive scene picking someone that people may not be as familiar against playing with, or instead maybe looking at specific matchups and deciding to play someone lower because you happen to think they match up better?
All the time.
85%.
all the time.
Oh my gosh.
So you
That
won't
I
always
mean,
just
there was
be
a
makes me
while
wanting
where
wondering
I would
what
hit the
doing.
random button in every game.
It's true.
Well,
I
it's
always go for the
interesting
random
because
button.
we play with so many people, even when it's not a battle royale or a Wicked League. We play with so many people. Like I know Jarek is gonna freaking kill it with Hades and King Candy. Like I absolutely know. I know Joker's gonna kill it with King Candy and a couple of other people. So it's obviously
Yeah.
easy to associate a few villains with somebody. But it's like, oh, they picked somebody else. Well, I know who I'm gonna pick. I am gonna destroy them. Like it's just so easy and so hard not to do that, in my opinion, unless
Meta,
you
any
go
thoughts?
random.
Sorry about that, Lord. Meta, any thoughts
Mhm.
about counterpicking or villain selection?
Oh man. Again, that's going to depend on how you see these characters, how you feel about about like these rankings and all that. Like, who's going to agree with you on this? Who's going to disagree with you on this? And it's a lot on, I think, what you think of. What's the word? What you think of when people that are starting out on this game, like, what are they going to go for? What are they going to try and do in terms of competition or in terms of just casual gameplay? Like, what are they going to achieve?
And Meta, for you?
For me, yeah, counterpicking in Villainous is obviously the way to go, because Villainous is the problem with the tier list is that you cannot how do I put it? The tier list doesn't reflect how each character plays with each other. Because Villainous is not strictly this character is better than the others. Sometimes it's like a game of rock paper scissors, that some characters do better than others. Maybe a character that's not as good is particularly good against one of the top tiers, for example. Especially with the conditions, because there are characters that will not activate your conditions. There are characters that will definitely activate your conditions. And there are some characters that will change how the other person plays, knowing that you have certain conditions. For example, Jafar. When you play as a Horn King against Jafar, you gotta make sure to play your ancient soldiers in a way that you don't have more than 3 at the same time, for example. And which is why in most competitive tournaments nowadays, we got some special rules when picking characters, so that it's more interesting and it's not simply choosing, for example, Madam Mim, or maybe I choose this character, and the other person picks obviously the character that is obviously a counter pick, for example, so that it's a bit more balanced and more entertaining to play and to watch.
Well said. And for anyone who is joining and is interested in getting into the scene, shameless plug, the Let's Get Wicked Discord is the place for all of this. We hold frequent tournaments. Everyone here that I have met has been a fantastic person for both just interaction with, for playing games, and for resources about learning more about the game. We're always looking for more people to join. In that sense, it is all coming together. And when I say that, I, of course, am talking about Yzma.
Mhm.
How do we feel about Eartha Kitt?
Ooh.
Yzma.
It is just
Aha.
phenomenal.
Love her so
I really
much,
like
to be
Isma.
honest.
Madame Zerone.
I would compare Yzma with either Cruella, Ursula, Evil Queen, or um, with uh, with with Gaston, or no, Facilier. That's the other one. But like, it's really fun how she plays mechanically wise, because it's like you have to have Krunk on you. He has to have the knife, and then you have to like wait for somebody to fate you to get Cusco, because then that way, oh, that'll be an easy win, just like Hades. But again, it's a lot of like, prepping up on of like the items that you have in your villains deck and the amount of heroes that you have in your fate deck. It's a lot of just different stuff that you have to take into consideration. But like competitive wise, a little hard because there are moments where it's like, okay, I have to get a game plan on and figure some stuff out. But like casually, she's just fun in general.
Mm-hmm. She
I
can
think
be quite.
Yzma is sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Go to sorry.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll go. I think for me, Yzma is the single swingiest villain in this entire game. If you get in after them and you pull out Cusco with no kids and you already have Kronk out, you win in like a couple turns. But then like you can spend a whole bunch of turns just trying to figure out where he is. Oh, we got to get rid of the kids. Oh, here's on the run. Oh, we got to reshuffle him. Like you have these extremes of how your game can go. But also the fact that she's kind of very resistant to fate, because she's one of those villains that you do not want to fate willy-nilly. And because of the way her fate decks are set up, like even a villain like Madame Mim, who is just like constantly fating, you're just like, well, which pile do I pick? You might look at a pile and find nothing playable there. And so Yzma kind of just continues doing her own thing a lot of the time.
I agree on that
What
point.
was the least amount of turns you need for Yzma to win?
2.
Mm-hmm.
She is technically, if the stars perfectly align, the fastest character in the game. And I mean perfectly align. But if they do...
Just like Hades. Just like Hades.
Nice.
Yes.
Exactly, just like Hades. It's like a lesser Hades.
Yes.
Yeah. Jarek, you wanted to jump in?
Because I remember one time I played with a friend that had never played Villainous. I explained him the rules, he picked Yzma, and obviously when you play with a new player that doesn't really play card games and stuff, you're not gonna fate them in the first turn or maybe not even the second turn, right? So I didn't, and I remember he won just by pure luck in the minimum number of turns that Yzma needed.
Wow.
Like he just got the after them card, he got Cusco, and then played Kronk, and by that point I don't remember well how we went, but I did say, there's like almost no way I can stop you.
I would say he's pretty tied. Yzma is pretty tied with Captain Hooks in terms of fastest winning. Granted, for her, it's a little more likely than Captain Hook getting his quick wins.
Okay.
Jarek, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. So Yzma adds a lot of flavor. I think all her her puns like on the cards are so great. Like they're just perfect. I think she playing very, very carefully is always the tricky part because you're picking one fate deck and you have to pick a location and think about it, like sometimes it kind of all depend on that RNG based on the reshuffle. Well, when you try to go for on the run or one of the kids as well, just slow her down as well. But she's very good competitive because she also has ferocity as well. When somebody defeats her strength of 3 or more, you defeat her strength of 3 or less as well. But you can also use the guards to kill Cusco with Kronk instead of Dagger. But there is a lot of very, very interesting strategies you can do. Play as Yzma and to play against Yzma. But fading her is tough, in my opinion. And she's very good competitively, though.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, certainly. I've seen some great Yzma players out there, and I think overall, if you don't have my luck, you're going to do quite well with her. She can be, as I think Wero pointed out, very swinging, both incredibly fast and incredibly difficult to pin down, which is very much into her flavor. Speaking of people who can be faster than I think people give them credit for, we haven't really touched on Syndrome, both because of I've seen some really fantastic Syndrome players, and yet I've also seen him absolutely stuck in a quagmire. How do we feel about Syndrome?
I can go first because I'm a Syndrome player. So, I Syndrome very high for me, but competitively, he's. I don't know if he can. Competitively, some people can find him very annoying, depending on how many conditions he pops off. As always, I feel like yes, you have to fading against him is tricky because you have to cover up the lair, you have to cover up the part of it sometimes. Downtown's very good to cover as well, but in the end game is actually definitely one of the trickier parts you can definitely go up against. But his fate deck is super rough as always with teamwork, and that was totally wicked, which is one of the most harsh fate cards in the game. I think it's almost monologue, I would say, but he's very, very sneaky. Like literally very sneaky. Very.
I've often adapted the strategy of I have one major modification out. I have two of them in my hand, and I just wait for the opportune time to go to one of the two player card spots, play them, get rid of them, and then immediately play Omnidroid 10. But it's really tough because you never know when monologue is going to come out and you have to discard the hand, or as soon as you have that was totally wicked comes out, then you're like, oh, now I need to play at least one. You say swingy. I would say Syndrome's pretty swingy as well in terms of fate deck, but also, I mean, he to be honest, he's mostly a condition player. If that's my opinion, because I mean, you play the condition where somebody gains power, you get a hero, they get -2. Somebody discards, 4 cards, you can draw, essentially 12 cards if you have all 3 condition copies, so you can have a massive hand. I find mostly playing my conditions with him is part of a strategy that a lot of people don't necessarily do. And in that aspect, some people will hold on to those conditions just for specific. But if you're playing a 1v1, oh, I'm not going to discard because either I'm playing Lotso or Syndrome, and that really helps them.
So, with regards to those conditions, I think you can't sleep on 15 years later because I think that's the main way to get around the, oh, have we gone past monologuing yet? Because say someone's stacked with teamwork, you'll go, okay, 15 years later, let's undo whatever you just did here. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you get an extra hero out, but you're trying to kill them anyway.
Mirage can also do that work for you as well.
It's true. That will also work.
Yep. And I have some more questions, more topics I want to ask sometimes. Sometimes Syndrome is a puzzle sometimes. For example, if that was Wicked is gone, I just rush my objective as always. But also, I've done the sneaky strats as well. For example, if someone gains power, use 15 years later, put a hero at power residence, and you could just win, or Mirage, those types of strategies.
Well, Vanquish hero, being an experienced player, and that's something I think that's important when evaluating any of these villains. Especially, it depends a lot on who is piling them. I, for instance, am not really a fantastic Horn King player, or even a very good Horn King player, but I've seen Wero do some pretty amazing things. And that changes my perception of him on the tier list.
Yeah.
How do we feel about Horn King? I think we gave him a little bit of short shrift earlier, so if anyone wants to jump in on that.
I mean, I was mentioned. I mean, you've got 2 viable ways to get the cauldron out. You want to search for Shaman the Black Cauldron, or we got you now, Pit Keeper. And just you... How do I don't know. I know if he sat in front of me, I know what I need to do, but it's expressing it's in the form of a checklist. Because you want to get allies out, you want to be discarding. That's kind of a general thing for every villain, is you want to be discarding. And I think that's going back to the Perfectly Wretched box. But another reason why people get stuck on them is because there's so many different ways I can win. These cards do so many different things. Well, you still need to discard. You still need to be getting to better cards. But with Horn King, you have to get out that cauldron. You have to flip it over. You have to start getting your guys out. You have to start getting those ancient soldiers out, and keeping more of it clear can be a challenge. But you still have I believe it's the dungeon that you have 2 power and a fate, and just once you have those Cauldron-born out, it's just so easy to keep your board clear.
So you think he should be ranked a little higher, perhaps, than he's often given credit for?
I mean, I think he's still like upper mid tier. I don't think he's like at the very tippy top, but he can win games.
Yeah.
Loki, you had something you want to jump in on there?
Yeah. Again, it's going to depend on how you play him. I think there are some points where with Syndrome, it is easy to win because, there are some locks that you can like easily get over. Then there are some here's then like you can easily kind of take a look at and be like, oh yeah, okay, this will be easy to dispatch. This one will be easy to send out or something like that. But it always depends on, how fast do you want to get your Omnidroids out? How fast do you want to get all of your um pieces lined up in order to create the domino effect?
Mm-hmm. Well said. Now, I would like to move real quickly here from supervillains and kings to two characters I think we haven't really discussed much at all yet. The two queens, and my wife will never forgive me if I don't talk about her. The Evil Queen and the Queen of Hearts. Meta, we
Yep.
haven't heard from you in a bit. Would you like to jump in on either or both of our wonderful, furious queens?
Yeah, I would like to talk about Queen of Hearts because when I started playing the game, Queen of Hearts seemed like one of the best characters because she can win fairly quickly, but the more I played her and the more I played against her, she can get really slowed down by fading, and also she can be set back sort of consistently by fading, which is how I was able to beat her using some, I would say, lower tier characters, like for example Cruel the Bill. I was playing one time with Cruel the Bill against Queen of Hearts, and I wasn't doing too well, so I just started fading and fading and fading, and it got to the point that Queen of Hearts could do pretty much nothing, and the player just decided to quit.
Oof.
Oof.
Painful.
But yeah, Queen of Hearts can be sort of fast because not only can she get lucky with the shot, but also she has a couple of pretty good cards that, like I said before, she's got the classic design for the villains, where she got permanent upgrades with the watch, for example, that just gives her money, a couple of allies that pretty much stay forever in the board. So I think she's probably mid tier. I don't know what you guys would think of her.
For me, I
Okay.
would say it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go. You go.
No. Go ahead. You first.
All right. For me, I consider her S tier just because I love her gameplay. It's pretty consistent, and it's pretty fun. Even you defeat Doc, somebody puts wishing well and puts them back on top, and you get faded with Doc again. It's pretty easy to overcome. One thing I do add is sort of like how with Ursula, you need to take care of heroes. You need to take care of it with Snow White. Because sure, you can add power to where Snow White's 9 or 10, but really, as long as you're consistently getting rid of a couple of heroes, she's actually not that hard. I think people just get flustered when you have you play the fake card where you can play both of them. You have Doc out, you have Dopey out. So I think people just get flustered with her and consider her a threat when you have, oh, she has 15 poison, but yet you still have to defeat Doc. Okay, it's not really a threat. Sure, they can go and then vanquish, but I think just people, in my opinion, think of her too much as a threat because she is pretty quick.
Yeah, personally, I would put Evil Queen at the top of the rankings. Yes, above Madam Mim. I think Evil Queen has a decent game into Madam Mim. I don't know, Lord Infinity, you have the stats.
So, in fact, I actually,
Barely.
it's funny as I actually played this match several times over in the battle royale. Um, of all the villains facing Madam Mim, Evil Queen has the highest win rate against Madam Mim. So in fact, let
Amazing.
me make sure I have the right page up for this. That shouldn't take long. Let's see. Here we are. So Evil Queen, Madam Mim. Evil Queen has a 60% win rate against Madam Mim, and it was a lot. What's it called?
Look
Before
at
I
that.
faced Evil Queen, it was a lot higher.
What
Uh,
what's the number of games in that statistic?
In that statistic in particular, we have, let's see, Evil Queen versus Madam Mim. Sorry, I'm having to switch between pages. We have 32 games.
Okay, so that's a decent sample size. And that fully makes sense to me because there's a lot of the time where facing Evil Queen, you get dead fates. But even then, as long as Evil Queen is able to unlock the cottage in a reasonable amount of time, I've had games as Evil Queen against inveterate faders who are just like constantly fading me, and I'm not even bothering them because I just want to go between the mine and the woods. Um, and then you can shove everybody into the woods, and you with Evil Queen, like I mean, with every villain, you kind of want to be thinking a few turns ahead. But with Evil Queen, I think it's the easiest. That okay, this turn I'll go there, next turn I'll kill Doc, and then the next turn I'll kill Snow White. Because yeah, Doc can keep coming out, but there is that turn in between. Because the only way to bring him back out without a lucky reshuffle is with Love's First Kiss, which puts him on top of the deck. It doesn't immediately replay him. So if you have it set up where I'm going to kill Doc this turn, then I'll kill Snow White the next turn, you're fine. She can gain a lot of power with her actions, and then you don't need to be sitting on poison. You want to be sitting on power, and then you convert it into poison when you need it. And so you wait for Happy to be squatting in your kingdom. Like, she's honestly, of all the villains, the one who wants heroes around. She wants them in play rather than just like wasting poison killing them because that means they're not doing their on play effects.
I think that's a fantastic
Correct.
point, and I think that's where competitive versus casual comes into play. Because competitive, I'm literally thinking like 6, 7 turns ahead, and potentially thinking of like all these outcomes, and that's why I'm a very like that's why I think my anxiety and ADHD help me is because like I'm used to thinking 5, 6, 7, 8 turns ahead, and I can even remember a match from like 3 years ago. Oh, you did this and that, so I can like keep that into a play. Versus the casual player, we're like, oh, I need to focus on this. I need to focus on that here. I need to get them down. So I think that's definitely where that aspect comes into play as well.
Yeah, I really like that
Yeah.
aspect a lot. Just trying to put your heroes like at one separate single location so you don't let them come back every time. And there's not that much of the fake deck yet. You not really gonna hurt you, you know?
Yeah. I honestly, that's why I put Evil Queen up at like my top, mainly because like it'd be easy for me to kind of like just farm for ingredients, farm for poison tokens, and so then that way like I'm able to have enough to poison the seven dwarves, and then I would have enough to poison Snow White before somebody would fate me, or that would happen. Pretty much, that's my take on the Evil Queen. With Queen of Hearts, that is a lot because there are so many parts in that in like her gameplay that I'm honestly saying like is a bit much, but then again, because of her villains deck and the fate deck, it also makes sense. So it's kind of a 50-50 win-win lose-lose kind of scenario.
Yeah, with Queen of Hearts, you really have to race. You are trying to get your objective done before you can get hit by 4 Mome Wraths. That is your goal.
Yeah. Alice, do you want like if Alice comes out, you're soft block with the Mome Ras as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can be. it's not very easy, but yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
No, this is actually, I was playing against Ham a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember what villain you were playing, but I was playing Queen of Hearts, and you got out Alice. I killed Alice. You got out some more stuff, and there came a point where I had done the take the shot. It failed. I had to reshuffle. And I had to draw into another take the shot and like finally ended up winning, but it was just like
I don't remember that. I don't know what he's talking about. Someone else. No, that's it. And that was the first game of Villainous, and I've never forgotten this. The first game of Villainous I ever played with offline. My wife was Queen of Hearts, and while we were all putting together our strategies and figuring out how the game went, she went right ahead and won. And in that moment, like most newcomers, I thought this is a character that can't be beat. She's too fast. She's too effective. I didn't even really know what those meant at the time, but that's how it felt. And yet, with the knowledge gained from the competitive scene and from insight from a lot of many people who are a lot better than me, you start to realize that there are things that you can do to stop them, and that makes them, it changes how you look at each of these villains, which I think we've done a pretty good job overall here. As far as I can tell, we've gone through almost everyone, even if we haven't gone through all of their different versions, whether it's the Introduction to Evil or Wicked Takes It All boxes. I don't know if we've spent quite as long on Tremaine and Radigan as perhaps some people would like to hear. So I would say, to sort of wrap things up here, is there anything anyone would like to say about Lady Tremaine and the Rat?
they're good.
Very
They're
good.
great.
Be very
I
careful
used
when
to
you play
be-
the rat.
Yes, I used to be a Radigan main before Shere Khan came out. I will say he is very fun to play as, but he dropped a little bit in rankings just because I feel like he is one of the more stale characters, if that makes sense, because I feel like you're just putting the gears out, trying to gain power, putting Felicia out, trying to vanquish Toby, dealing with Flabbersham and the Queen's Guards. So in that aspect, I don't necessarily enjoy playing him as much, but like as a competitive or somebody to play against, he's still pretty dang tough to beat.
Honestly, though,
Yeah.
for me, Radigan, the competitively, he's very good thematically, but you need to fade him early, constantly to block his action, so he can struggle as always.
But you need to be real careful, because if you get out an early
Mhm.
Basil and then you're like, well, where do I put Basil? And then
Nope.
like this is another game against Ham. It was like I had an early Basil, I put him in Buckingham Palace. It's like I need to block this fate because I think I was playing Shere Khan. And then later, like that here comes the Robot Queen, here comes an airship. It's like I can't do anything because I played Basil early.
I do
No
remember that
Basil.
one. That went really well. Meta, how about for you, Radigan or Lady Tremaine, in terms of what you enjoy about them and how strong you think they might be?
I prefer to play Radigan, mostly because you can play him in a way that you're literally doing everything in the order of the movie. But I love both characters. Lady Tremaine is very fun with her conditions. Radigan is awesome because of his second win condition, which makes him very interesting to play against. And of course, which one I would think is better? Possibly Radigan, but mostly because Lady Tremaine, if you fake her enough, she can get really stuck on. She can get really set back. But Lady Tremaine is another solid character, and is also a weak character to play against for some, because there are lots of conditions that are triggered by vanquishing heroes, defeating heroes, and Lady Tremaine pretty much will not be doing that. So that's very interesting to play against Lady Tremaine.
One thing I like about Lady Tremaine is that she's one of the few villains where I see myself playing every single card in her villain deck. Like, there's a couple of villains where it's like, this is always discard fodder. I will never play this. Like, Hades' Achilles heel. It's like, why is this here? Or 4 dozen eggs. Why is this here? But with Tremaine, it's like, okay, sometimes I do need to trigger a reshuffleable play if I said if. Okay, I do want to trap Hera, so that's the condition and the action. You got to get rid of Cinderella sometimes. Okay, we got to play you Little Thief. And then like your conditions are all useful. Sometimes you do have to play Midnight. But you're still cycling a lot because you need to get to your daughters, you need to get to their pretty dresses, and you need your items. So it's, what do I hold on to? What do I get rid of? Because everything has a use at some point.
Yeah, I agree with that. With Radical, now that you mention it, there are a couple cards that aren't super useful. That like you can use them, but you would rather discard them. For example, Fidget's List. Normally, I would rather just discard it and see what's the next card. Because
I almost always play Fidget's List.
Yeah,
I consider that a must play.
yeah, really. Because most of the time I would rather discard and maybe activate something else.
Yeah, the thing is, with you could lose like your ruffians or like Felicia you don't really care about because you got the bell, but you also lose your good effects as well.
Yeah, especially with Fidget Lists, I remember that because the Radigan has so many items, there were so many times that I would activate Fidget List and I would just get the next card in the deck and I would feel like I wasted an activation.
Don't play Radigan versus Jafar. Not a good idea.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
See, but again, if you overfate Radigan, that can help him. Oh, here's an early Basil. Or like, oh, you have to play the makeshift balloon. You can't save the queen with this later.
Oh, man.
Gets by Toby as well.
Felicia at the same spot, and Basil's right there. Oh, I can just go activate.
You know what's funny? You mentioned Radigan versus Jafar. Radigan actually has a 61.1% win rate against Jafar.
That's one I did not expect.
Could you repeat it, please?
So they were mentioning how Radigan shouldn't go against Jafar because of how many items he has and him triggering deception. But the humor is Radigan actually is the winner in that matchup on average at 61.1%. And for the curiosity of how many games that actually reflects, that's of 95 games.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yep.
That's some impressive data right there. And that's the kind of interesting data and effective use of it you can hear all in the Let's Get Wicked Discord. Have I mentioned that before? I think overall, what we're looking at here is that while some villains have been perceived as always strong, there is always a counter to that particularly strong villain. There are villains that are overlooked because perhaps they're not played especially well, or their objectives can be a bit intimidating to newcomers, and so new strategies aren't always developed with them. But I want to throw something back here to what Lord of the Plains said originally, is that no matter how many games of this you play, there is almost always, something new you're going to discover, whether a certain combo, a certain interaction, just the way that you can look at a card that you thought was useless for a long time and realize that it actually does have a very important function. I think that's speaking to how well balanced overall the game can be, even if at times it doesn't feel like it is. Well, I think this has been actually quite thought-provoking and fantastic. So, having covered all the villains, I think the only thing that I can take away from this for sure is that Maleficent is the best and everyone else is an F tier. Since we all agree with that, I'm going to say thank you to all of you, all our fantastic commentators, for coming on and giving us your fantastic insight. But especially, of course, thanks to our listeners. We hope you'll join us in the Let's Get Wicked Discord. We cannot wait to have you back here. So please remember, bring your friends, bring your family, and of course, bring your villains. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Adios.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.